The night she said she could not afford the date, the words fell between them like shattered glass, sharp enough to cut pride, hope, and whatever fragile courage she had borrowed just to be there. The restaurant lights blurred as tears threatened to spill, and for a moment it felt like the whole world had leaned in to watch her break. He did not raise his voice or look away. He only froze, as if life had pressed pause on a man who had already learned what it meant to lose everything and still keep breathing. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in the quiet miracles that happen when people choose compassion over judgment, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from, because stories like this connect hearts across the world. Her name was Emily Carter, and she had not planned to cry that evening. She had planned to sit straight, smile politely, and make the evening feel normal, even though nothing about her life had felt normal in years. Bills stacked on her kitchen counter like silent accusations, her phone buzzing with reminders she could not answer, and the constant fear of one small disaster tipping her into a place she might never climb out of. Saying she could not afford the date was not about the money alone. It was about the humiliation of admitting that she was tired of pretending she was okay when she was barely holding herself together. Across from her sat Daniel Brooks, a man whose eyes carried a depth that only loss could carve into a human soul. He was a single father to triplets, 3 little boys who had turned his life upside down and, somehow, stitched it back together at the same time. His wife had died 3 years earlier, leaving behind a house full of toys, unanswered questions, and a man who had to learn overnight how to braid hair for school plays, cook dinners that did not come from a box, and soothe nightmares that were not just his children's, but his own. Dating had not been part of his plan. Survival had been. Emily did not know any of this yet. She only knew that Daniel was kind in a quiet way, the kind that did not perform goodness for applause. She had met him at a local library fundraiser, where he had been chasing 3 identical boys between book aisles, apologizing to strangers with a tired smile. Something about the way he laughed at his own exhaustion had felt familiar to her. They had talked about ordinary things, about weather and favorite childhood memories, about how life rarely turned out the way people expected. When he asked her out, she said yes before fear could talk her out of it. Now fear had the floor. She expected disappointment. She expected that polite, stiff smile people give when they realize you are more broken than they signed up for. What she did not expect was what came next, because before Daniel could even respond, 3 small figures appeared at the edge of the table like tiny guardians. His triplets had insisted on waiting nearby with a babysitter, too curious about the woman their father seemed nervous to meet. They were the kind of children who felt emotions loudly and honestly, without filters or strategy. They did not understand adult pride or social expectations. They only saw a woman whose eyes were shining with unshed tears, whose hands trembled slightly as she tried to hold herself together. Without words, without permission, they closed the distance. One placed a small hand over hers, another leaned his head against her arm, and the third simply looked up at her with a seriousness that felt ancient. In that moment, something inside Emily cracked open. The tears she had been fighting finally fell, silent and unstoppable. Daniel watched, his chest tightening, not with embarrassment but with recognition. He had seen that look before in the mirror at 3 in the morning when the house was quiet and grief finally had space to speak. He knew what it meant to feel ashamed of needing help. He knew what it meant to think you were failing at adulthood because you could not keep up with a world that never slowed down. The evening did not end the way Emily had feared. There was no awkward goodbye, no sense of rejection hanging in the air. Instead, there was a walk under dim streetlights, the boys skipping ahead, arguing over which cloud looked like a dinosaur. There was laughter that surprised Emily with how easily it came once the pressure lifted. There was the realization that sometimes the worst moments are only doorways to something unexpectedly gentle. In the weeks that followed, Emily tried to convince herself it had been a fluke, a one-time kindness that did not mean anything more. But Daniel kept showing up in small, steady ways. A text checking if she got home safe. A coffee left on her desk when he knew she had an early shift. No grand gestures, no rescuer fantasy, just consistency. And slowly, carefully, she let herself believe that she did not have to hide the messy parts of her life around him. Daniel's world was chaos wrapped in love. Mornings began before sunrise, with mismatched socks and cereal spills, with backpacks forgotten and last-minute school projects assembled with tape and prayers. Money was tight for him too, stretched thin by childcare, medical bills, and the invisible cost of grief. But his children had taught him something powerful, that worth was not measured by what you could buy, but by how present you were when it mattered. Emily started spending time at his home, learning the rhythms of their lives. She learned which child needed extra reassurance at bedtime, which one pretended to be fearless but hated thunderstorms, which one always noticed when adults were sad. They accepted her without suspicion, without questions about her past. To them, she was simply another heart willing to care. Her own struggles did not magically disappear. There were still nights she cried alone, still moments when panic crept in, whispering that she did not deserve this warmth. But now, when the weight felt unbearable, there were small hands tugging her back into the present. There was a man who listened without trying to fix her, who understood that sometimes love was just sitting with someone in the dark until the fear passed. The turning point came quietly, the way most real transformations do. Emily lost her job after her company downsized, and the old shame came rushing back with brutal force. She considered pulling away, convinced she was becoming a burden. But when she finally told Daniel, expecting distance, she found solidarity instead. He shared his own fears, his own moments of doubt as a single father who often felt like he was one mistake away from failing his children. They stood there, not as savior and saved, but as two imperfect people choosing honesty over pride. Opportunity arrived not as a miracle, but as a chance. A local nonprofit needed someone with Emily's skills, offering modest pay but meaningful work. She took it, and for the first time in years, she felt useful in a way that fed her soul. Daniel's children celebrated her first day like it was a holiday, drawing pictures and taping them to the fridge. It was impossible not to cry, but this time the tears were different. They were lighter. Seasons changed. The boys grew taller, louder, more confident. Emily grew stronger, steadier, learning that her value did not disappear when her bank account dipped. Daniel learned that loving again did not betray the memory of his late wife, that his heart had room to honor the past and still build something new. One evening, long after that first painful date, they returned to the same street, walking without the weight of expectation. There was no restaurant reservation, no performance to maintain. Just the quiet knowledge that they had chosen each other through honesty, through vulnerability, through moments that could have driven them apart but instead pulled them closer. Just before the ending, please comment below and tell us what part of this story stayed with you the most. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can come from the most unexpected places and that broken moments can lead to beautiful beginnings, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps stories like this reach others who may need a little hope today. Emily never forgot the night she said she could not afford the date. Not because of the shame, but because it was the night she learned that love does not keep score, that family can find you when you least expect it, and that sometimes it takes the innocent refusal of 3 children to let someone cry to remind us that being human is not a weakness. It is the beginning of everything.